Doug, I was thinking about some of my visits to Nairobi, Kenya, the homeland of the Obama family, and I was in Nairobi and other cities and towns of Kenya in 2008 when Obama was running. In fact, my other members of my family, my daughter Carissa and her husband Marshall, and my son, and others were in Nairobi. They left Nairobi 2 weeks before the rioting broke out in Kenya.
Wow.
Okay, now when I was in Kenya in 2008, every place I went, Kenyan pastors and Christians told me, Rick, when you go back to America, tell the people, do not allow Obama to be elected. I heard this repeatedly when I was in Kenya in 2008.
Wow.
His cousin is Raila Odinga. His cousin was responsible for the riots. He ran for president. He lost the election, and so he set the country on fire. His thugs fanned out through the nation, and they just burned. They burned the homes of anybody who voted for the other candidate, the president, the incumbent president. They chopped off the arms of people. I met a young man that had his arm was missing. He told me they used a machete to chop his arm off. They said, you voted the wrong way, so we're going to cut your arm off. I was in, I saw tent cities, tens of thousands of people in tents because their homes had been burned down. I was in one city in northwestern Kenya, up by the Uganda border, where I saw just rows and rows, streets of burned out houses and storefronts and churches. And matter of fact, it was in that city is where the Odinga supporters burned. They burned women and children to death in a church. It was an Assemblies of God church, and they put all the women and children in the church and set it on fire. And when the mothers were throwing their children out the windows of the burning church, the Odinga supporters were throwing them back into the church.
Oh.
Right? Okay, we're talking about Barack Obama's cousin, Raila Odinga. Okay, now I was in I had meetings inside the Kenyan government. What do you call it? It's like the compound. They have an enclave in the center of the city where all their main government buildings are located. The presidential office and the Supreme Court and all that stuff is there. The national security offices and so I was given access in there by a man who was an advisor to President Mataki, and he told me that President Mataki called the U.S. State Department. This is when George Bush was in the White House. This was still 2008, 2007, 2008. That the president of Kenya, Mr. Mataki, called the Secretary of State. I'm trying to think who was. I guess it was it Condoleezza Rice at that time, and said, "Please get your Senator Obama out of my country. He is causing trouble everywhere he goes." See, Obama was in Kenya as a street organizer, as an agitator, before the presidential election of Kenya. He was there. He was raising money. He raised a substantial sum of money for his cousin Raila Odinga. And after the election, when Odinga lost the election, Obama was on the phone almost daily with cousin Odinga. So what I'm saying is this man is a dangerous revolutionary. And the same thing that he told his cousin to do in Nairobi is the same thing he'll tell his thugs to do in the United States.
Wow. That's pretty deep. And when people understand the implications of that, and as they should, then they can see what we're dealing with here in America today. When you've got someone like that, people say, well, he's just a community organizer, as if That's just a lowly position, but it's not. I mean, when you can organize, I guess just to say it outright, when you can organize death and destruction in a manner that befell Kenya, then certainly think of what you can do to the United States or with the United States with the right formula. And I'm not saying, of course, that it would be that bad here in this country, but what I'm saying is everything you said, people have to understand what you said is so important, Rick, to understand who this guy is.
Doug, I remember, this just flashed back in my mind, I remember getting off the plane in Atlanta. I had just arrived back in the United States. I mean, I came off the plane, went through customs. I'm in the airport. I'm waiting on my connecting flight to get home. And I was in one of those airport restaurants and standing in line, and there was a young American couple there in front of me, and we started chatting, and they said, they asked me a question. I said, I just flew in from Nairobi, Kenya. You know, it was like I've been flying for 28 hours. You know, I was all kind of glassy-eyed, and so they were making comments about what it's like, to fly that far, and Anyhow, I told them. I remember standing there telling them. They said, what was the most memorable thing about your trip to Africa? And I said, you're not going to believe it. Now, this was 2008. This was the summer of 2008, and so the campaign was underway.
Right.
Okay? And they said, what was your most memorable thing about your trip to Africa? And I said, it's not going to be the wildlife. It's not going to be the scenery. I said, everywhere I went, Kenyans told me, go back to America and warn the people, do not allow Barack Obama to be elected. And that couple's face went ash white. I mean, they were stunned. I'm certain they were Obama supporters. And they were like, what? And I said, the guy's responsible for the rioting and the bloodshed and the fires that erupted in Kenya after the election. They told me, don't let this guy get in the White House.
Well, meanwhile, they probably got in their Prius and drove to their, McMansion and continued
right.
with their life. And people have, and the biggest thing I'm running into here with this, Rick, is people have a normalcy bias, and that's a real thing. When the wildfire is bearing down in your house, and you're thinking, well, it's not going to hit my house, and pretty soon, you got smoke coming underneath the doors. That's where we're at right now. We have this mentality, this normalcy bias, where it can't happen in America because it hasn't, at least not in modern history. But it will happen because of the lack of education, that the lack of understanding of what we have done to date. And I mean, a lot of this too, and I don't want to stray far, but a lot of this is, in my estimation, not only as an investigator but as a Christian. A lot of this is, from our moral straying morally and straying from our Christian, Judeo-Christian roots, of course. But look, people have to understand that this guy, as well as his people that are very close to him, are planning to keep him in power. And keeping him in power, that is that's their only goal right now, is keeping this man in power. And now somebody might say, well, what happens if whoever the Republican nominee or whoever the other nominee wins? Well, then he watch out between the date of the election and the inauguration day for false flag operations, for a number of different things that happen. Then it could be even worse, perhaps. But the bottom line is, while Obama is still in power, still has the reins of power to create the conditions to cause to take complete control over this country in a Marxist style or in a communist style, and take over to restrict the travel, and then we're going to see exactly what perhaps what the Kenyans saw, maybe minus the machetes, but certainly the burning of houses and the economic and racial and just the chaos in general.
Sure.
Chaos, and don't forget, Obama is a revolutionary, and all of his people around him are revolutionaries, and they thrive on chaos.
And because you've talked to the former FBI informer that infiltrated the Weather Underground in the 60s and 70s. And the thing that was shocking to him, when he was in the meetings with Bill Ayers and that ilk, they were talking in the 70s about the revolution that would take place in America someday, and they knew that there would be a resistance to the revolution, and they talked about the need to re-educate millions of Americans to accept the revolution, and then they talked about the need that they would have to exterminate tens of millions of hardcore resistors.
Right.
Now, those are the people who are in power today.
Exactly. And I'll tell you, so I don't think I've had such a sobering interview with any person before than Larry Grathwohl, who was the informant for the FBI, who said flat out that they would have no problem, meaning Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dohrn and those people, they would have no, and you know, folks, Bernardine Dohrn, Bill Ayers are very close to Barack Hussein Obama or Barry Soetoro. They would have no problem with killing, exterminating, as you say, tens of millions of people. And people say, well, that's just lunacy. Well, no, it's not. That's their mindset. Maybe that's lunacy to you and I, but to them, it's a natural course of events, something that has to be done to cleanse the palate that will be their America as they want to shape it. And that, again, you know, so as we talked about before, the endgame scenario, why all of the executive orders, why the why the orders of ammunition by the Department of Homeland Security, you know, alone, they don't really look like they're just merely dots on a piece of paper. But
they're also, Homeland Security has also purchased bulletproof checkpoint buildings.
Yep.
That, you know, for large enough to hold 2, 3, 4 agents. But these checkpoint buildings are going to go up, you know, major intersections and throughout cities across America.
Exactly, and you know, one of the big things right now, and everyone should be so knowledgeable about, is when you travel, when you fly, you go to the airport, you know, you are treated like a criminal, where you are searched and you are nuked by these machines, and people touch you inappropriately. Where outside of that venue, if someone did that to you, they would be arrested for assault, for sexual assault, aggravated sexual assault. What's going on here? Why is this still going on? Well, I'll tell you why it's still going on. It's to condition the people to get ready for this and look, this is normal. This is the way it should be. And we, over the last 24 hours, we heard of some alleged more sophisticated underwear bombing plot. This fits into their plans to legitimize the TSA, to put them on the streets of this country and in different parts of the country, and allow them to grope you. And you know, again, without trying to be graphic here, but I'm telling you, this is a matter of conditioning of the American populace. We've already been. I don't like to use the word dumbed down, but I guess, or the phrase dumbed down, but I guess I will. We've already been conditioned. Hey, this is normal. You know, the guys in the black ski masks, you know, holding the paramilitary rifles. This is normal now. This is normal in America. No, it should not be. No, it's not normal. People, please wake up. And don't believe me. Please do your own research. Look at what's happening to this country and see if my source, and again, this is just one person in a large agency, but he sees where, from his vantage point of what's going on, he hears things. I truly believe him, you know, and I got to tell you, everything is starting to fall into place. It's starting to fit. So I'm just saying, do your own research. Don't just believe me or believe Rick. But, I mean, I believe Rick. But
Doug, I think the greatest shock that will hit the American people will be the revelation of the depth of the betrayal of this nation when they discover how many people in high positions knowingly participated in a conspiracy to overthrow the constitutional republic of the nation.
Absolutely. You know, when you said that off air before our interview, I thought about that, and you know, that is astounding for a paycheck, for a lifestyle, for an unfettered existence or a relatively good existence. You're going to sell out the constitutional republic known as the United States of America for this. To me, that's unforgivable. And those people will pay when the time does come, and I'm sure it will. And I say that with sadness. Those people will pay, and perhaps be the first to pay.
Does your source indicate that there are other bureaucrats, agents, government employees who are aware of these nefarious plans and are disturbed?
Well, yes to both. Some are aware, and it's almost as if they're just going through the motions and saying, well, look, nothing really is going to happen. It's just going to, it's...
contingency plans.
Yeah, exactly. And who knows, multiple nuclear devices could go off in this country, and we might need this stuff to fight off the enemy that's going to invade America. And, I mean, things like that. And then there's another group, and my source kind of, and I know a couple of the people that he, shall we say, hangs with, but pardon the expression, but who say, hey, there's something totally wrong here. But, you at this point, no one, and things are such at the Department of Homeland Security and at these buildings where anything coming in or coming out of these buildings, you cannot take anything in or out. You can't take emails, you can't take thumb drives, you can't take papers. I mean, so how are you going to get the word out and be believed? And if one person stands up from inside the agency and says this is what's going on, they're going to be mocked, ridiculed, Alinsky style.
Does your source indicate that he has a gut feeling, or whether he's picking up information that the elite expect these things to happen soon?
Well, actually, yes, and he's saying that he would be surprised if we will make it to the elections without seeing riots in America, riots in American streets, especially beginning in the cities, the urban areas first, and spreading outward, and then that followed by travel restrictions. So time-wise, he's saying any time. Again, watch Europe, watch what happens over there when the dollar. I mean, it seems to me, and there are a couple of scenarios possible, Rick, but it seems to me that his whole thing is he's saying, look, it's gonna be blamed, or the trigger point is going to be the economic factor, because that will be the most easily explained and the most publicly accepted, because people already know we're $16 trillion in debt. People already know that the debt. Anybody with a modicum of common sense know that our debt is unsustainable. So,
and besides, what happened Sunday in France, this sealed the fate of the euro. But the French people defeating Nicolas Sarkozy, embracing a flaming socialist who's a member of the Bilderberg group,
right,
and Mr. Francois Hollande. And so the French people embraced a socialist. Mr. Obama immediately invited him to the White House. He's going to be here in Chicago for the NATO summit. But Mr. Hollande is going to tax the rich. He wants a 75% tax on wealthy people. He's going to increase government welfare programs. I don't know where he's going to get the money. Who's going to loan the money to France? He can't print money because the euro is controlled by the European Central Bank. So I don't see any other option other than France is going to get – they're going to go the way of Greece very quickly. The euro is going to collapse. I think the election of Hollande greatly accelerated the collapse stage of the euro. So we're looking at an imminent collapse of the euro currency, break up the European Union. And Doug, I don't know if you've ever read a prophecy that was given by the late Pastor David Wilkerson. It's about 20-some years old. I think it was in the late 80s. And I've talked about it on this program from the beginning of this radio program. But he said the Lord showed him that there would be an economic crisis in Europe. It would spread to a Latin American country, and then it would go to Mexico. And then he said the day after Mexico has a panic, he said wealthy foreigners will withdraw billions and billions of dollars from American banks in a panic to cover their losses. And he said the American banking system will collapse in one day. And he said you have 2 weeks from the time the first crisis starts in Europe until it hits the U.S., 2 weeks. And that was a prophecy that he gave to a church over 20-some years ago. And he said that there would be 6 months of the worst rioting you can imagine. This is really lining up right now to look like it's imminent.
Wow. Unfortunately, I don't recall, and I may have heard that, but I don't recall hearing that.
I'll send you a copy of it after the program because it's very eerie how it's lining up with what we just talked about.
Indeed, and I have to say that that makes sense. I mean, that entire thing makes sense, and of course, when what can I say?
He said the country would survive, but it would never be the same. He said there'll be 6 months of total chaos and rioting, looting, mobs. But he said when it's over, America will not be the same.
Well, Rick, one thing that my source did tell me to do was look up a quote from Henry Kissinger, who spoke at a Bilderberg meeting back in 1992 in France. And he said that's kind of how things are, in terms of the mentality here meaning at that level of DHS. And the quote really simply is this: today, Americans would be outraged if UN troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow, they will be grateful. And I'll stop it there because that's enough to know that things are going to happen. And Americans are going to, there's going to be rioting. There's going to be people, again, think of 1965. Think of 1968, the Watts riots in 65, the 68 riots in Chicago and elsewhere across the country. And multiply that by exponentially. Just exponentially. And expect that and prepare for that. And pray, though, that it doesn't happen. Prepare, but pray it doesn't happen.
Doug, I appreciate you coming by today and giving us this latest information. I don't know with your source how long he's going to be able to continue passing things on to you. I think it's probably becoming very dangerous for him to make phone calls to you.
Well, the only thing I can say is God bless him, and I know that he's working in other ways to get the word out with others, thankfully. And I do hope that if it's not me, it's someone else. But I hope that people understand that this country is in deep, serious trouble. And, Rick, thank you for your program and for your knowledge and for your information. And I would urge everyone, and not that you need my endorsement for crying out loud, who am I? But thank you for everything you do because, and then, folks, this program is so important to listen to. You give you're a great dot connector. And I'll tell you what, if you weren't a talk show host, I'd ask you to come work with me as an investigator because I'm sure we could put some things together. But
I think if I had another career, that's exactly what I'd do. I'd be one bad investigator. Because I'll tell you what, I hate criminals. I hate crooks. I hate lying and scheming, and I can smell them. I can find those rascals,
Well, listening to your programs, I just love the way you bring things together. I really do, and I tell you, I'm hooked on TruNews.
I'm going to invent someday a dot connector. I'm going to sell these things to government agencies because not one agency has a dot connector.
Well, you're the human dot connector. Now, if you can clone yourself or Mechanica, put something together to
there's got to be a way to produce a dot connector device, and we could just make a fortune selling them to intelligence agencies and law enforcement agencies. Doug, hey, listen, I'm telling my audience, this is I'm not trying to frighten people, but I'm just telling you. I'm very, very careful about using this radio microphone I'm careful about the words that I put across on the radio because I never want to be a drama queen. I never want to cry wolf, and I don't want to frighten people. But personally, this is what I'm telling you, what I'm doing personally. I am preparing, I am bracing that we have the remainder of May, June, and maybe part of July to get ready. I think from mid-July on, I think we're in dangerous territory. And I would not risk my life and my security by procrastinating and taking my time and thinking that, well, later in the summer I might do some things to prepare. I'm telling you, I think you've got May, June, and part of July to get things together. I think after that, anything could happen. I think the last 6 months of this year are going to be chaotic. And I'm issuing the highest level alert that I can issue to our audience.
And Rick, one last thing, if I may.
Yes.
I do hope I'm wrong. I hope my source is incorrect, or even better, I hope that by spreading the word that things don't happen, that things are actually prevented by people becoming more aware of things. That would be great. So, the best thing that can happen, and I don't know who else would say something like this, but I really hope that I am absolutely 100% incorrect, or the situation or the facts are wrong in this case. But
well, the best thing we can do is shine lights on these rats.
That's it. That's it. And you've got a huge spotlight, and I want to thank you so much for shining that spotlight on this. And we'll just pray and prepare.
Okay.
That's what we'll do.
All
Thank
right.
you, Rick.
Doug Hagmann, the website HomelandSecurityUS.com. Homeland Security.